Hello, welcome back to the Days That Changes podcast. My name is Jeremy Vaughn. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference in healthy shame and what you can consider toxic shame. And a really big difference that I know that I've identified within my own experiences, especially around those big key moments in life that really do change the path that we're on. The premise of this podcast, The Days That Change Us, are born from the big moments, big decisions that we make, experiences that we live through. And there being a difference between healthy shame and what we can consider like toxic shame that either drives behavior or drives us to withdraw. And it's a really key difference. And a lot of times where I find that I've been stuck before, or guys that I've worked with have been stuck before when experiencing shame, is that it's the shame that is lying in your identity, the shame telling you that you are a bad person. So we can consider healthy shame to be behavior based. Now, behavior based means that what I just did doesn't align with who I want to be, my values. So it's actually driving us to change a behavior because of the shame that we feel of how we acted, how we behaved doesn't line up. Maybe we misspoke to our partner, or we lost our temper at someone, and we may feel that little ping of shame after. We can kind of consider that the aftermath. And that's really important. That's really good to experience shame in that moment because it helps redirect us back onto the path that aligns with our values and who we want to be. We don't want to be someone who is yelling at our partner or losing our temper at some random stranger. We want to feel we are in control of our emotions, connected to them, and able to properly express them and communicate them, whether that's, again, to our partner, anyone in our life, or some random stranger. So the healthy part of shame is that it's not identifying to ourselves. It's about identifying to the behavior. Where a lot of guys have been caught up, including myself, is tying what's happened to ourselves. So meaning I am a bad person because this just happened. It's my fault. It's all on me, and it's I am the bad person here. And when we experience that, it's almost like a depressant on who we are. It is holding us back from taking action because it starts to become defeating, almost like this defeated hopelessness of why bother? I'm just a bad person. And that's a really dangerous slope for us to be in because it doesn't help us take any sort of change in our behavior or accountability. It just creates this cycle of shame and depressing and following back on withdrawing from people in our life, taking action on things, risk, fear. There's so many things tied into that. And, for me, just to tie in a story here, is that when I came home from prison, I was incarcerated for 3 years from 2008 to 2010. And when I came home, what I was experiencing when I first came home was that toxic shame. I was so scared for someone to find out what had happened to me, what I had experienced. And that shame really tried to kind of keep me from saying anything, or really even working through it, admitting it to myself. And it took therapy. It took some good friends calling me forward on my behavior and led me into taking more action on this. and realizing the more I speak about it, the more I can see that, right, it's because of my behavior I ended up in prison, being incarcerated. It's not me. Like, Jeremy is not a bad person because he's been incarcerated, but that was the idea I had because I was so full of shame, and it was tied to my identity because I thought, wow, the action is somehow being tied to my identity. Me being in prison now makes me some sort of bad person. That's what I believed when I came home. And it took a lot of unwinding, through different therapeutic practices and experiential therapies that helped me unwind from that, to separate the experience from myself. And I think that's really important to do, because then it helps you see the experience for what it is outside of yourself. And I don't know if you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, I've been through something incredibly difficult and you feel shame about it, but you're not talking about it, you're not working through it, you're not unpacking it, then it has nowhere to go but to swirl inside of you. And that becomes a really dark, dangerous place for us. And we start to become very isolated from true connection around us. Maybe, how we are interacting in relationships. And it can really take time to unwind from. But when we start to associate, if I use that example of prison from this lens of healthy shame and toxic shame, healthy shame is telling me in that moment of being incarcerated, right, my behavior of how I was landed me here. That doesn't align with who I want to be and who I see myself being in this world. So therefore, the shame I was feeling about that shifted, right? So I came home, I was feeling the toxic shame, and when I can start to separate, I start to experience healthy shame. And healthy shame helped me be like, right, like it was my behavior that landed me in this position, not who I am as a person, because who we are as people aren't what we do, right? What we do are just experiences that we have, and we can separate that out, and that we can change our behavior going forward, which changes our experience, which changes our emotions that we feel, changes the thoughts that we experience and hold on to. So when I come home, that transition from toxic shame to healthy shame was really, really important, because now in that lens of healthy shame, I can see, right, I don't want to go back to that person I was that landed me in prison. I recognize that I was in pain in my later teens, into my, early 20s when I got incarcerated. I was in pain. I was acting through pain. I was acting through a lot of masks that I had on my personality and self-protective behaviors. But I recognize I don't want to have those. I don't want to carry those. So it takes work to undo that. And I did that. But the healthy shame is important for me to feel and associate with still. I recognize, because like I can talk about incarceration now and I might still feel levels of shame about it, but it's not causing me to withdraw and pull back. It's like, right, that was not good behavior of me. I was lying to people. I was being stressful of relationships, and that was really bad. And it was important for me to feel it, because it drives me towards the opposite behavior and being someone who I want to be in this world. And so I think that's a really healthy distinction for us, particularly us guys, where there's so many of us that sit with shame. But if we don't give it its proper, identification, label, let's call it, then we just think that any shame is bad, or that it starts to keep us holding things in, right? It's the same thing I see so often, and I've experienced for myself with emotions, is that if we give it more language, give it more nuance, give it more description, then it helps us feel more in control. But if we're not doing that with our emotions, then most emotions just feel foreign and out of control, and we push them away or suppress them. And that also leads to really poor outcomes for us. So what I'd invite you to do is, when you're feeling shame, is understand, is it from a behavior that was happening in my life, or that I'm doing, that I'm feeling this shame for? Good. I want to feel that, because now that's going to help me align with my values and who I want to show up as in the world, to people who I love, people who love me, and how I can show up better, how I can improve on how I show up, right? So it's such an important experience to have, shame. So let's not turn away from it, turn towards it, but also help give it its proper label, its proper identification, so you can work with it rather than it just totally taking over. Okay. So that's my invitation. And take that and just sit with that and see what may be there for you. Have a great day. That's it for now. See you soon.